Tēnā koutou katoa, nice to be here, and thank you very much for asking me to speak. I'm an academic, so you're going to be here a few hours before the next speaker comes on. I'll try not to make it too long. So it's my pleasure to talk a little bit about our experience with polystyrene as a product on construction sites. It's mainly research-based, but some of it's about experience. We've spent the last 10 to 15 years on construction sites, not always just looking at plastics, but plastics has been a big focus for the last 5 years. So let's crack into it. Now, some of you in the room are going to be thinking, oh my God, a miracle product, what is she talking about? But from a science perspective, EPS is pretty cool in many ways. Incredibly lightweight, easy to carry, brilliant insulator. There are some good things to say about polystyrene. And as a scientist, I've got to be fair, and I've got to look at both sides of the equation. So I'm going to try and do that as I go through my presentation. Now, polystyrene, EPS, styrene, PIR, they're all the same, right? Well, they're not. Unfortunately, we interchange them, and that's where we can fall into problems, especially when it comes to finding solutions for the waste at the end of the day. They're all quite different, and so we're going to have a little look through some of the different products. GPPS are our general, Gregor?
General purpose polystyrene.
I can never do that one. General purpose polystyrene, so things like our CD covers. We've also got our high impact polystyrene. So this is stuff that's actually got some structure to it and can put up with a bit of battering around. We've got XPS, which is extruded polystyrene, and then EPS, which is our expanded polystyrene. And in a bit, I'll tell you a little bit about how the last two are made, because it's quite fascinating. I mentioned before that it's a great product, and in many ways it is. And I'll say the same for a lot of plastics. They're great products, but what we do with them isn't so great, unfortunately. Lots of different uses for polystyrene. I'll give you some statistics about its use in the built environment, but one of the ones that I quite like is that it's actually 98% air. It sounds like something you'd find on a pack of a box in a supermarket, you know, like 99% fat-free. The rest of it's all sugar. Again, very cheap, very lightweight, easy to install. These are all the good things. I'll tell you all the terrible things later on, so don't worry. It's not going to be all positive. So where is it in construction? Many of you will have seen it on site. This is not a surprise. I'm not there to surprise you. But there's a huge amount that comes from kitchen and bathroom fit-outs, so that bit at the end of the build where you've just got so much packaging. And often that's the tough one to get rid of. And there are a few reasons for that. It should be easy because it all comes at the same time, but you end up with so much of it, you've got to find somewhere to store it. You need to keep it dry. If you want it recycled and you've got food waste on it or contamination or mould or anything else, you can forget it. It's not going to be recycled. Sometimes it's difficult to encourage the take-back schemes that currently run to actually look at packaging polystyrene. And then even when it does get taken back, what happens to it? And we'll have a look at that in a moment. So, of the polystyrene, the EPS that's manufactured in New Zealand, it's not actually manufactured. What actually happens is the polystyrene comes to us, and then we make it into EPS. And that process that happens here, about 72% of all of that ends up in the built environment. It's quite big, isn't it, really? Nearly 3/4. So basically what happens is polystyrene gets heated with some steam, and then there's a blowing agent that goes through, which is usually pentane, and it makes the little beads. And then it gets heated again with steam and fused together to make polystyrene as we know and love it. So that's the process. So we did some research on plastics. As I said, we've done it for the last 5 years. And what we found was that when we looked at polystyrene, expanded polystyrene, so I must actually use the full term, when we looked at EPS, 64% was actually insulation or componentry. 36% packaging. So that's kind of what we're looking at. As I said before, the packaging tends to happen all at once, so should be easier to manage, but isn't for many reasons. So we looked at all the plastics. This took us a good 4 years. We worked on 6 sites, a mixture of commercial and residential, and we looked at all the plastics that came off, which meant counting every single plastic item, weighing it, analysing it. And I say that thinking that I really did none of it. I let my staff do, which is quite mean. I did stand in a skip once. This is what it looks like, and you can see that in terms of the proportion of the plastic waste, polystyrene's only 4% by mass, but actually 17% by volume. We know that. We know it's not very dense. But volume can make a big, big difference when you've got skips to fill and when you're being charged per skip. And the interesting thing about polystyrene is that one of these full bulk bags only weighs 10 to 14 kilograms, which is great because it means you can actually pick it up, which is a good thing. But let's have a look at what it means in your skip. So if you take a 9 metre cube skip, what you could put in that skip is 2,200 kilograms of plasterboard, or 1,300 kilograms of timber, or 261 kilograms of plastic. Or for polystyrene, what do you reckon? Give me a number. Let's use closest, because I always bring treats. These have been in the bag for a while, so I can't guarantee they're edible. Say that again?
100 kgs.
Yeah, this is pretty good.
50.
82. I think whoever said 100, you get it. Where's the 100 person? Excuse my terrible throw-in. Sorry, Nigel. Oh, not bad. So volume means everything, right? This is not much polystyrene, and remember that it's 98% air, and it's filling your entire skip. So what can you do on site if you're a builder that's practical? And what we do at EIC is all about practical. We actually go onto sites. Although we do some of this stuff on the computer and it's science-based, most of our time is spent on sites and seeing, can this actually happen? Because if it can't, there's no point in us recommending it. So we've set up some signage to help people on site. It's all in different languages, but actually the main thing about it is not the language, it's actually the pictures. We use real pictures of stuff that we found on site to make signage. And in case you wondered, it's all freely available on the Waste Hub, www.wastehub.co.nz. And that signage has been set up to help people to separate their waste, because it's really important, especially when you know that our different variants of polystyrene type materials, some can be recycled and some can't. So there's no point sticking it all in one bin because it'll end up all in landfill. We also have training programs that we go onto site and we talk to people about why this is important, why should you care, how can we help you, how can we make it cheaper, easier, simpler. We design toolbox talks and we take the toolbox talks out and give them to companies and say, those toolbox talks, use them like your health and safety talk at the beginning of the week. Use it in the same way, know what stage you're at in your building, and this is what you're going to expect in terms of plastics coming in. And again, we just translated those into Chinese, which we're very proud of. So there's some good advice on Plastics NZ website, which talks about how you can store it properly, how you can prevent pollution, stack it flat, cover it, etc. Do people go on the site and look at it if they've got a construction site? It's not actually that likely, but it is there. And recommendations around how you cut on sites. But the main thing that we've added is don't get confused, and it's easily done. You're a builder, you're on site, time is precious, you've got a lot on, it's noisy, it's busy, and somebody says, oh, no, it doesn't go in that bag. And you can imagine the response. I'm not going to do it, I'll be much politer than that. So some of the things to be aware of if you're a builder on site. So EPS, white, crumbly, we all know what it looks like. I don't really know why I brought it, but just because, you know, I brought the others, so. Does anybody want it? Should I put it on the floor? You can have a play with it later. Nicely dirty, that one. Okay, so that can be recycled as long as it's clean, it's dry, it's not mouldy, it's not covered in food. Okay, PIR board, where you gone? Here we go. This one has got foil, it's usually on the top and the bottom, but it's got foil on it, and this actually isn't EPS, okay? It's a different type of foam. That can't be recycled, so don't try that one. If that one comes in, that one has to go in the bin at the moment. Thank you. Well, this is quite nice, I've got an assistant. Should have said that earlier, shouldn't I? XPS, so this is extruded polystyrene. So again, you get polystyrene in, and it's a similar process, but it makes smaller beads and it's more dense. And again, this extruded polystyrene, used often for insulation as well, that can't be recycled. You can tell the difference if you sort of tap it and squeeze it. It feels very different to the other one. And that definitely can't be recycled. And it's not always yellow, unfortunately. And finally, polyethylene foam. Now that's the stuff, how can I explain it? Sometimes when you get a package, you'll get like a sort of foam layer, and it's quite squishy and compressible. It's often white and sometimes it's waffly. That is actually polyethylene foam. It's not EPS at all, and that most certainly can't be recycled the way you would recycle those other EPS products. So they're the things to look out for, and again, the way we get this across is we communicate with pictures, because if we wrote the words down when do not put PIR in there, No one would listen. Recycling options. There are a few recyclers in Auckland, and we have actually gone out and visited them to see, what are you doing? Where's it going? What are you doing with that? Because we're a bit nosy like that. And we also want to make sure that what's happening is not, we're sending it away to make photo frames, because that worries us a little bit at EIC. Or it's used in high heels. Did you know that? They use it in the heels of shoes. There are some take-back programs from some of the companies, and they can work, and particularly for EPS that's used structurally. And they are available, and they often recycle their own products for free. But those products that they recycle into are not always 100% recycled. So things like your beanbag fill, that is 100% EPS recycled. But when it goes into new insulation pods, they need to put a little bit of virgin EPS in. So it's about 50% recycled, 50% virgin. And then there's the stuff that just gets sent overseas, which you might argue, well, surely it's better than nothing. Yeah, actually, from some of the calculations we've run, I'm not convinced it is better than nothing. Actually, sending it all the way overseas to become a little coat hanger, which comes back to New Zealand, lasts for 5 minutes, breaks in half, and goes straight into the bin after it's travelled all the way there and all the way back, not convinced we're really doing ourselves any favours. So when you go home tonight, go into your cupboard, pull out your coat hanger, and turn it around and see if it's got a 6 on it. If it is, then that is actually polystyrene that was EPS but has now been kind of compressed into that black plastic coat hanger that we all thought was HDPE and completely recyclable, till we put it under the FTIR and realised it wasn't. So on site, unfortunately, it's not often properly managed, and part of the reason for that is that construction sites aren't waste management sites. Funny that. They're there to build. So actually, why should they, or why would they know how to manage their waste perfectly? Whether or not it should be something they do in the future, or whether there should be a hybrid approach to this, whereas some things are separated that have got high value and you can recycle, and other stuff has a different treatment, and maybe it is a skip to landfill treatment, is still something that we're discussing. Despite being in the environmental circuit, we don't believe that you can salvage everything. It's a nice idea, but zero waste. Better education and management, we know that, we see it on site, but the question is, where does the money and the support come to enable that to happen? And I don't know the answer for that. We also know that often it's cut on site, and unfortunately once it's been cut on site, if it's not done carefully, bits of polystyrene go everywhere, we all know this, and if you're on a site that's high up or steep-sided or it's a windy day, that polystyrene is going to go everywhere. And it's not something that we want to see. Find it on the beach, not particularly pleasant. So on site, in reality, the reason we don't get better outcomes, partly from mixing up the different types of, can I just call them foam, but your EPS, your XPS and EPS together. And people not realising that they're all different things and they can't all be recycled. Not really storing things properly, not using them and then thinking, I'll store them, I'll get them sorted later because it will be cheaper to do it in one load, and I totally get that. I'm not saying that's wrong, but unfortunately it leads to loss, it leads to them getting dirty, and then that causes problems. Contamination, which we see all the time. I like the fact that Joanne, who wrote the slides for me, has put, wasps were living in here, just in case you couldn't see it. And then also not being properly contained. So if you put it in a skip like this, on a windy day, half of it's gone. Environmental impacts. We know it's easily spread around the environment. We've seen it. We've seen it in our natural environment, and for me that constitutes that it's at elevated levels and therefore is a contaminant. It's actually really difficult to actually have any enforcement because it's really difficult to pinpoint where it came from. At the end of life, reuse is relatively limited, and that is probably because for buildings at the end of their life, it's really hard to separate it. Obviously, there's no chance with demolition. There's not that much chance with deconstruction, and there's often hazardous materials that are associated with it. As you know, it sticks to lots of things, and often it's glued to things, and it just makes it really difficult to salvage at end of life. Also, what happens to older buildings when they're demolished in the future? Well, then we're looking at flame retardant in EPS that's really not a nice substance, that was only really stopped use in 2016, 2017. Now that particular compound is not a nice substance, and that is likely to be present in many of the older buildings that are being demolished, and that makes it really almost impossible to recycle. And as I mentioned before, it takes up a lot of space in landfills. So what are the alternatives? Just saying. Not going to say anymore because they're here and I don't need to. But that's one option. We like to encourage people to target materials that are made from a single product, and the reason is that that makes them so much more recyclable at the end of their life if they're just made from one product. The minute you start sandwiching and hybriding and mixing things, it makes it really difficult to separate at the end of life. Products that are removable, and so that might actually mean changing how you build things and how you attach things so that they can be removable, reusable and easily recycled. That's what we're really looking for. And even better, products for which we can do reuse or recycling in New Zealand. I know that's an ideal. I know that's not possible for everything right now. We're not that naive. But in an ideal world, that's what we'd be looking for. So there are all sorts of alternatives. This one's an alternative for insulation, and there's a great fungal packaging system. It's probably not at a stage yet where it can quite live up to the demand if everybody went, oh, we're going that way. But, you know, great idea, and we love innovation. As part of what we do is we go into unis and we nose around and go, oh my God, there's some great stuff going on here. And then we take it out on site and see whether or not it really is that great, or whether or not it's really not going to happen. But it's great that people are doing good things. So what would we like to see? That came up the wrong time, didn't it? We'd like to see better regulation and management of EPS on construction sites. We'd definitely like to see better education and people going out and giving that education. I know there's some amazing people out there that do. I know Claude's one of them, does an incredible job. Simon Wilkinson, lots of other people doing a great job out there. But I think we need more. Greater support for collections and our kind of take back or stewardship schemes with a bit more traceability on where stuff's going. Is it actually making a difference? And to try and really phase out the unnecessary use. So phasing out packaging where we don't need it. If it's not necessary, let's just get rid of it, and let's have a conversation with our suppliers and manufacturers and encourage that sort of behaviour. Thank you very much.